A very good evening to one and all, and welcome to this session. So, first of all, congratulations on acing CAT. As someone who has been at your place just a year back, we do get the mixed emotions that you might be going through these days. So, through this conversation, hopefully, we'll be able to help you with the FMS interview process, which is slightly different than the interviews at other B schools. So, hey guys, this is Anushika Srivastava joining in from Kanpur. I am a BSc graduate with physics and chemistry as a major subjects and have 14 months work experience in digital media industry. Joining FMS has been the best part of my life till now and I'm absolutely loving this journey here. Looking forward to meeting some of you in the campus this year. Over to you, Ishpani.
Thank you, Anushika. A very good evening to our joinees. My name is Ishbani, and I'm a first year student at FMS. I have completed my BSc in Chemistry Honors from Delhi University in 2021, and I was a fresher. And I have done internships with various organizations. So here are we today to help you out with your queries as to how to prepare for FMS and your journey ahead. Over to you, Kostu.
Hey, hello everyone. This is Kaustubh and I'm from Kanpur. I am currently joining from Delhi. I graduated from IIT BHU last year. I appeared for CAT 2020 and scored 99.99 percentile, post which I appeared for multiple interviews and finally decided to join FMS Delhi. And right now I'm in my first year and I'll be interning at Amazon this summers. So that's about me. Over to Akhilesh.
Yeah, thanks, Kaustubh. So I'm Akhilesh Anand, and I'm originally from Faridabad. And prior to joining FMS, I had also completed my undergraduate in mechanical engineering from IIT BHU. Post which I during the December 2020, I gave my CAT exam and got many different calls from many different B schools, and finally ended up joining FMS. And in the summers, I'll be joining Amex as a credit and fraud risk analyst. Over to Apurva.
Hello everyone, very warm evening. So I'm Apurva, I am from Vardha and joining in from there. I graduated from VNIT in 2019 and I worked at Deloitte in IT consulting as a technology analyst for 2 years. This is when I decided to give CAT. It was my very first attempt and I gave the CAT and yes, I got many calls and decided to join FMS finally. I'm loving my journey here and looking forward to add a great value to your journey towards it. So I think we'll go ahead with the session. So first of all, we decided to have a discussion on your SOPs and how it will have an impact on your overall interview process. So all of you might have submitted your SOPs during your application for FMS. So as we all know, SOP plays a very major role when we talk about interviews, a majority part of it, and it's very mandatory that they more or less talk about your SOP. Around SOP, they'll ask you questions, maybe around why do you want to pursue an MBA, why do you want to join FMS particularly, and what are you looking forward to after MBA, which domain are you targeting, and why is that so, how your journey has impacted you to finally join that particular domain. So this is what we write generally in our SOP, and that is why these questions come up. And talking about my interview specifically, I was asked, the first question I was asked was, why do you want to pursue an MBA, and why do you want to join FMS, etc. So I'm passing it on to Ishbani. You can continue with your SOP experience.
Yeah, thank you, Purva. So going back 1 year, I remember that SOP was the most important part when it came to interviews, and we all were worried as to what to write in our SOPs. So going by my experience, SOP is the gateway for interview. You can drive your interview in any direction by your SOPs. As the time is over to edit it, now what we have to do is to, be aware of what we have written in SOPs and prepare answers for it. Like some of us must be having work experience, so we must be aware as to what all work we have done and how to connect that with our future goals, and as how to present it in front of the interviewers. So over to you, Akhilesh.
Yeah, thanks, Ishbani. Actually, my experience with the discussion on SOP was that they were trying to basically give me situations in my interview, which were basically in what I thought was they were trying to test whether my thought process and my decision making was consistent with what I have written in my SOP. For instance, I had written about football as football management as something that drove my interest towards management as a whole, and how I worked my way through college and gained more interest towards the field. So they were trying to look for those things, like gave me such in certain situations in this situation, what would be your how would you go about it, and things like that. So most of the things were about that. And apart from that, since I was a fresher and I had mentioned that in my SOP that this is why I want to pursue an MBA, so they asked me some counter questions on that as well, like why not a couple of years from now you can gain more experience from in the industry and then come back here. So these were the things that were asked to me in this case. But yeah, mostly it is about backing up your answer that you have already written. Over to you, Costa.
Yeah, sure. So, so basically, when it comes to the SOP for FMS, there is a word limit of 100 words, which leaves you with no other option but to write exactly what you're trying to convey. So I decided to frame my SOP in such a way that it answers three major questions that are why MBA, why MBA from FMS, and what value would you be adding once you are admitted to the program. So it was around this that I tried to frame my answer. I put it slightly towards finance side. I tried to back it up with my internship that I did with a fintech company. But what I realized during the interview and during the SOP discussion was that the primary focus from your SOP is on your intent. What is your intent for doing an MBA, and what exactly are your aspirations? So one of the things that I remember from my interview is that from my entire SOP, there was one particular phrase which said that I want to learn from FMS with its value-based approach towards education. So they poked me on what do you mean by value-based approach towards education, and I had to explain it and I had to give examples to justify it. So those are some of the things I noticed. Over to you, Apurva.
I guess I would like to add something to what
Anushika.
Kaustubh said. Yeah. So actually, I feel SOP is a part of the interview where you have to deal with self introspection. One of the suggestions that is a generic suggestion for basically everyone, not specifically from my interview, will be that be very much cautious about what you say while you convey or while you answer the questions related to your SOP. It should be very much personalized. And as for example, for me, it was majorly focused towards marketing. uh, you have to see that why you are planning to pursue an MBA, and which domain you are willing to join, and how will FMS add a value to your MBA journey, and vice versa. How all these questions are interconnected, and how these align to your life values. Basically, a very personalized answer to why MBA, why FMS, and how will FMS help you, and obviously your long and short term goals. So be very specific in these four answers, and I feel it should be good enough to deal with the SOP part. Okay. Cool. Over to you, Apurva.
Yeah, so I think this is what we had regarding our SOPs. So let's
Can
take
I
this ahead.
add one more point to this? Yeah. So I think one of the things that I noticed during my interview was that since I had mentioned something very specific in my SOP, so as far as I noticed, this is something that you should generally avoid, as I found out during my interview as well, because if you don't add generic things or end up adding something specific to your SOP, chances are that the interviewer might not be aware of those. So you won't be able to basically show that how much you know about that particular subject or not. So what would happen in that case is that you would be asked very generic questions in that case. So that is one thing. And another thing was in your in your SOP, it should be, as Anushika mentioned, that it should be mentioned how it aligns with your life values and how in certain situations, how would you behave, and how would you behave? So those are the things that I think are important while writing your SOP as well, and as well as backing them during the interview.
So next we should go to interview preparation as to how we all prepared for interviews. Akhilesh, would you like to start with it?
We had an audio disconnect. Could you repeat?
So we are starting with interview preparation as to how we all prepared for our interviews. So would you like to start with it?
Yeah, sure. So one thing, I would get right into it. One thing I noticed compared to other B schools that I gave interviews for, one thing was that there is lesser emphasis on the domain specific prep that you have done in FMS compared to other B schools, which was the case with me since I'm an engineer. So what happened was, generally in other B schools, you have basically two kinds of questions that you are asked. One are the generic HR questions that they generally ask you, like why MBA and things like that. Other would be the domain specific knowledge. For instance, I was a mechanical engineer, right? So what happened was, they used to ask me in other B schools, they used to ask me about certain subjects that I had studied and things like that. In FMS's interview, that was not the case until you specifically mentioned that you have studied something that might relate to an MBA course. For instance, I didn't get asked about IC engines or things like that. So that was one thing I noticed that might help you with your prep, that a bit of lesser emphasis on your course knowledge and more about what you might bring to FMS. So over to you, Kaustubh.
So one of the things that I felt during my interview preparation was that no matter how much you prepare well and whatever diverse sources that you prepare from for various different aspects that are covered during the interview, the most important thing I felt was how true you are being to yourself and your stories. In that you don't lose your integrity, and the interviewers at the other end of the table would know it sooner or later. So that is something that I felt was very crucial. Coming to the preparation, I think it is very similar to what other B schools have, the interview part, to be precise. Which includes reading, keeping up to date with the news, reading current affairs, reading about your own hometown, about the current status quo of the country. Other than that, if you come to the FMS interview process, it is basically in three parts. There is the SOP, there is the extempore, and there is the personal interview. So we'll come to these three parts in detail later on. So yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead. So when we talk about interview preparation, I myself had divided it into three sections. One was your SOP related questions. The other was your HR questions. And the third one is current affairs. So when we talk about your the personal questions, I would like to give an advice here that be prepared with your stories. Whatever you tell in your interview, in your SOPs, that will lead to your next question. Even the question that asks to tell about yourself, you will be asked nitty-gritties around it. Like they'll catch one particular phrase and or word and ask you about it. So be ready with everything you say. Be ready with the story behind it, and say it in a very structured manner and a crisp way, so that the it is conveyed in a proper manner and it's not very cliched. Then the other thing is about current affairs. So when you read about current affairs, read it to the detail, because whenever you are asked about one particular news, it may happen that they go to the depth of it. It happened with me. So my advice would be, whenever you read the news, don't just read the highlights, but get to the details of it. And one more thing is about your HR questions. So be prepared, as I said, be prepared in a structured way. Tell the situation, explain the context in a crisp way, tell what you did and the result of that. So yeah, that is it. Forwarding it to Anushika.
Yeah, okay. So I guess you people have covered pretty much all the things. But yes, one thing that happened with me was, as we talked in SOP, that do mention the domain that you're interested in. this doesn't guarantee that you will get the questions only from the domain that you're interested in. Now, finance is something that I'm afraid of even today. I just run away from it as much as I can. And in fact, in my interview, I was asked questions on finance itself. So, since I was a physics graduate, I was asked questions first on physics concept and then somehow, related to finance and something like that. So do not limit yourself to just one of the domains that you are mentioning. That's fine that you have your favorite domain, but have knowledge about each and everything, I would say. And especially for the people with work experience, I guess you should be able to answer everything from the perspective of the work that you are doing. Because I used to work in a women-centric organization, and I was posed with a lot of GK questions that were specifically related to the situation of women in country and all the news that was going around during that time. So okay, first work experience. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much enough. Okay, over to you, Ishpani.
So I broadly divided my interview preparation in categories like HR questions, current affairs, academic questions. So HR questions, as covered by my peers, should be crisp, and you should provide a story behind it as to what you have done and how it relates to your future goals and your MBA. When it came to current affairs, so I was not an avid reader, but then I was forced to be one just to prepare for interviews, and you have to be abreast of all the current happenings around you which has taken place in past 1 year, be it budget, be it globalization or relation between the countries. You should be abreast of everything. When it comes to academics, a basic knowledge of the subjects that you have studied at the graduation or post graduation level is required. So I remember my interview experience. It started off well with HR questions, and then it shifted towards academic questions. After that, I posed my domain of interest as marketing, but then I wasn't asked questions related to it. As Anushika mentioned, even I was asked questions related to finance, of which I had very little knowledge. But then it comes ability to think at the moment, and then you have to come up with answers that you may not be very confident of, but you have to put it across in such a way that they look convincing. So that was my interview experience.
Okay, I just read a question in the live section, so I'd like to answer it. Someone has mentioned that he hasn't structured the SOP and it was vague. So I understand that because I had a friend who hadn't structured the SOP well. I know the SOP for FMS particularly is very small. It's not very lengthy, and you can write just 100 words. I believe it was the same this year too. So the questions will be more or less same, despite the fact that your SOP is structured or not. SOP is your statement of purpose. So the purpose of doing MBA, the purpose you have in your life after doing MBA will be asked. So you need not worry about that.
In fact, my own SOP was not structured well, because I still remember the last day. It was around 30th December. And at that moment, I was not really well aware of what to even include in the SOP. So I just wrote it, and obviously considering keeping the three questions in mind: why MBA, why FMS, and your long-term, short-term goals, etc. And the interview day, I once again went through my SOP and I sort of was confused. What did I even write it here? It's so unstructured. So I feel all the sentences or statements that you have written in your SOP, just be ready with all the counter questions on that. Build a story and it should be good enough. There is nothing like if it's not structured, so you should be afraid or anything like that. It's totally fine.
Also, I would like to add that you should try and prepare multiple drafts, and with every iteration, you should try and connect the dots so that there comes a flow in your SOP.
So now we'll come to the most important part of FMS interview, which is just unique to FMS, which is extempore. So all of us were very haunted by extempore process because we weren't prepared for it, and it was just unique to FMS, and it was never asked in any other B school. So how to prepare for it? The best way, like we all started looking for resources online, what topics were asked in previous years, and that's how we started our journey for extempore preparation. They usually provide us 1 minute to talk about a topic, and we are given 10 to 15 seconds to think about it. So we have to think very fast and at the moment as to what we have to speak, and it should be coherent. We cannot speak anything gibberish about the topic. So we have to be in our absolute senses as to what we are going to think and speak and how we are going to connect it. So I remember the topic that was provided to me during my extempore was peer pressure. So I started by explaining what peer pressure is, how it affects students of different age groups, starting with teenagers and then coming to college students. And then I came as to how to tackle it, what steps could be taken at the personal level and as well as by the organizations to solve the problem of peer pressure. So over to you, Kaustubh, to share your experience.
Sure. So, as Ishbani mentioned, the format of the extempore is that you are given a topic and there are around 10 to 15 seconds to think, which means that you have to be absolutely on your feet, and there is very little scope of preparation helping you with it. And it's more of on the feet thinking, I would say. So, my extempore topic was I have a dream, and that was just it. What I gauged from the interviewer was that who also happens to be one of our beloved professors. The topic was given in such a way that it reminded me of a very famous quote by Martin Luther King, which started by "I have a dream" and went on to explain about how racism exists in USA. What I did was that I sort of gauged that maybe he was referring to that quote, and I started with it. And then I went on to explain about how one should strive to build a global community free of racism, casteism, and all sorts of discriminations. So that was my extempore experience. Over to you, Apurva.
Yes. So when we talk about extempore, my topic was who do you think is better, a smart person or a hardworking person? So it was an abstract topic. And what I had prepared for extempore was I prepared myself with 5 to 6, like I practiced with 5 to 6 topics. So it's very short time. You can't really tell everything that you have with you. You have to first prioritize what you want to speak in a very short duration. So firstly, what my suggestion would be, just give a very quick intro, like what do you think about the topic? So my topic was who do you think is better? So I had to decide who I think was better. So I told, and then I told a small example which proved my thinking, my logical thinking behind that. And then in the end, I concluded it. So that 1 minute is very important, and you have to utilize it to the fullest. So just have just have few points when they give you a little time before your extempore. Just write them down and cover them in a very structured way in the given shorter time. Over to you, Akhilesh.
Yeah, thanks. So generally, you are given a choice. You are given a topic. Then, if you're not comfortable with that topic, you're given another one. So the topic I was given and I chose it at first glance was commercialization in sports. So I structured it as since I had been a part of a lot of GDs and essay writing. So I structured it in the form of an essay only. That I first tried to mention what are the advantages of commercialization of sports, such as that people are watching it worldwide and things like that. Then I tried to cover the disadvantages, and finally I concluded with what are the how can we basically eradicate those problems that commercialization generally brings with it, and concluded it within, I think, a minute or so only. So that was my experience. And yeah, in terms of topics that are specific, again, you can follow a structured approach, but in terms of abstract topics, yeah, as Kaustubh mentioned, that you can start off with something that you relate with, since yeah, I had a dream is a very common quote from Martin Luther King. So yeah.
Going ahead, my topic was around Me Too, as I mentioned previously that I worked in a women-centric organization. So even for my friends, I felt there was one common thing that most of the times your extempore topic is something which is either related to your academics or your hobbies that you have mentioned, or maybe your work experience, like it's somehow related to you. So the first step towards preparing for extempore will be preparing for each and everything that you plan on speaking in the interview, or which is already there in your CV or SOP. Like I still remember one of my friends mentioned that he is a great fan of movies. So he was given one of the movies that he mentioned was his favorite, and he had to speak on that for like 2 minutes. So first of all, prepare for that. And then when it comes to abstract topics, I feel that is where storytelling comes into scene. So even if you have prepared for something that is already there in the SOP and which is something already related to you, I feel you can again copy paste it in even an abstract topic. Like you can just begin with an introduction and then continue with what you have already prepared for. So I feel fitting those things in, like you have prepared some answers and then fitting those answers in a different questions, that is an art. And I think this is a time when you should actually know how to go ahead with it. This actually helps in extempore. And again, I feel what Apurva said, that writing points helps a lot. Do not just go on writing whatsoever you plan on speaking, just write some bullet points so that even if you're missing out on something, you know that okay, I was about to speak about this and now maybe I can continue. Another thing, you really don't need to be afraid of the professors. They are very nice. And I mean, I haven't really heard that anyone's extempore went bad, at least in our batch. They are very accommodating, and obviously they also know that you are preparing for it and you are just about to speak after thinking for like 1 minute. So don't think that you have to just be excellent in that. No, that's not the case. Just give your best, and that's it.
Adding to what Anushika said, like talking about abstract topics, the topics we are not aware of, those topics I feel are the easiest one because we can take forward them in any direction we want. I remember experience of one of my friend at FMS who got topic as blue. So he started just giving that blue is a color, and then he took it in the direction of water. Like water is usually associated with the color blue, and how there's scarcity of water throughout the world and what we can do at our end to save it. So it's just upon our creative thinking as to how we deal with such kind of topics, and for that we just have 15 to 20 seconds, so we have to do that really fast.
One more thing I'd like to highlight here is if they give you a topic which you don't know about, right? If you have zero information about it, you haven't even heard, so you can ask the interviewer to change it. So I would suggest not to do it for abstract topics, not at all. But when you get a topic related to current affairs or something you don't know at all about, so rather than keeping quiet, it's better to get it changed.
So there's a question on the chat, right? Can you tell us about your preparation for extempore? So I think my preparation wasn't very specific towards extempore. So what I had done was, since I was shortlisted for B schools that had a separate VAT session that they were conducting, my idea was to structure any extempore that I get in the form of an essay. Right. So that was my thing, that if, instead of a 15-minute timeline that you are usually given, you can try and cram it down to as short as possible, and try the same approach only. That you are instead of around 200 words, you have to basically just come up to basically say around 100, and structure it in around 3 to 4 sentences only.
So there is one more question in the chat regarding how to justify gap of 2 years due to UPSC. So yes, we have friends at FMS who have a gap of 2 to 3 years, more than that also, due to UPSC. So it's completely normal, first thing. Second thing is you can justify it telling your overall experience. When you prepare about your UPSC, it's not just UPSC, right? You might have done some other things while preparing for it. So you can talk about them, what you learned out of them. There might be some internships you have done. Maybe if that is the case, you can talk about that. So it's completely normal to have a gap due to UPSC, and you can talk about all these things.
And yeah, one more thing I would like to add to that question is that even UPSC preparation is considered to be a very learning experience. So if you are able to highlight your learnings and if you are able to show your failures in a positive light during the interview, that might do the trick.
Yeah, exactly. Like since Apurva mentioned that you might have done some internship, even if you have not done any internship, I feel UPSC preparation in itself is a good learning process, like Kaustubh said. So you can build upon that, and even if like sometimes you might face a question like this that you thought of pursuing your UPSC and now you are thinking of pursuing MBA. So that means you're not even sure about what you want to do in life. Because I was posed with a similar question since I was in the field of journalism from physics to journalism and then to MBA. So it was a lot of transitions. So you might face a similar question. Just be ready to answer it with confidence that, you know, this is a time when I am self introspecting and I feel management is a choice that I want to go ahead with due to some of your personal reasons. I mean, obviously, you have to mention those reasons. So be prepared with those reasons. But yes, if you have been preparing for UPSC, first, highlight the learning process. But second, be ready to answer the question that why this transition from UPSC to management. Is it because you couldn't succeed in that one arena and that is why you're coming here? So you have to be confident while answering it and show each and everything that you are speaking in a positive light.
I think in any case of a gap year or two, not just specific to UPSC, the common approach that I've seen people go with is that they try to portray it as, for instance, in my case, I had a lot of friends who had taken a gap year for JE prep or CAT prep. So what they used to do was they used to portray it in the form of how dedicated they were towards the cause, and even if they didn't succeed, what were the learnings and what were the takeaways that would help them in not just in their managerial career, not just in their life at FMS, but throughout their career as well. So those were the things that they used to do. I personally didn't have a gap year, but generally people who did, you told me this, that this was the approach they took, and I think it succeeded.
So now we'll be sharing our interview experiences as what did we experience in the short span of 10 minutes, which made us come to our red building of dreams. So we'll start with Kaustubh. Kaustubh, would you like to share your experience?
Sure. So, as far as I remember, I was interviewed in the first slot of the first day. That was 22nd April. And there were two panelists, one male professor and one female. And my interview personally started on a somewhat funny note. When I entered the Zoom meeting, I was logged in with my CAT roll number, and we were supposed to have our full names on the screen instead. And so the professors made a joke out of it. But then the interview started. They made me feel comfortable. They explained the entire interview process. Then they went on to interview me for around 15 minutes. The questions included the questions which were asked were about me, why I wanted to do an MBA, some of your typical HR questions. Post which they asked me some situational questions. For example, one of the questions that I was asked was that out of three hypothetical scenarios, if I had to choose one, which one would it be? And the scenarios were being a personal assistant to Alia Bhatt, or uh, being a uh, being a manager to Ratan Tata, and these type of choices. Then it followed with a discussion on my hobbies. So I had mentioned in my hobby that I was a cricket enthusiast, and I had also mentioned that I'm a quizzer. So I was asked that what is a Chinaman in cricket, and then I went on to give an answer with which he was not satisfied. So I gave another examples of Chinaman bowlers, how the term came from. So that was pretty much my interview. Towards the last part of my interview, I was asked some questions about what social work I have done for the society. And as far as I could remember at that time, the only social work I had done was getting my parents and some of my relatives vaccinated. So I told this to them and they laughed at it. And uh, the interview ended on a more or less happy note. So yeah, that was my interview experience. Over to you, Anushika.
Yeah, so unlike others, my interview lasted for like 35 minutes. Initially, when I told this in the WhatsApp group, no one really believed me, but I feel it was my best interview, and it was a very casual conversation. I mean, again, since the interviewer is one of our beloved faculties here, I still remember he's related to finance, and I said that I want to get into marketing. So he first started with tell me something about yourself, and then obviously extempore, and then started asking me some physics concepts like Brownian motion, and asked me to connect it with stock market. Now, someone who like literally dreads finance, that was a question that I was not even prepared for. I didn't even think anyone is going to ask me, how do you think will you connect Brownian motion with stock market? But thankfully, somehow I just used my logic and just said whatsoever came to my mind. Then again, he asked me to connect. He somehow asked me the gravitational force constant and the formula, and asked me to connect it with trade between two countries. Now, someone who hasn't even read anything about finance, I was not sure, but again, I just somehow used my logic and answered it. So I feel the key factor here is that instead of thinking that you will be if you answer, what if the answer is wrong, don't think about it. What the interviewers are looking for is your thought process. Because I feel even when we sat for the internship interviews, there were many such times when we didn't even know the exact answer, but we were just playing upon our thought process. So that is why I feel they look for candidates who can actually think and answer it spontaneously instead of being prepared for it and then going ahead with it. So that was one of the parts. The other part was, how was your IIM Bangalore and IIM Calcutta interview, and how would you rate it? Again, how would you rate your IIM Bangalore, IIM Calcutta, and FMS interview? Now, this was again a tricky question. And then, what will you choose between IIM Bangalore, Calcutta, and FMS? So please be prepared for such questions. Obviously, mention USPs of FMS in that. Tell me something about, yeah, again, I told that I love writing poetries. So he asked me to write a poetry then and there. Thankfully, I had prepared one such poem beforehand. Well, I can tell them that yes, I have written it just now, but I didn't upload it in my blog previously. So if you are mentioning any such hobby, be prepared again to showcase it then and there. I guess, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, so I'll go next. My interview experience was, it basically started with SOP discussion. So they asked me about my work experience later. So I had worked with Deloitte for 2 years. So they asked me about how my projects went, how was I able to contribute to every project I was a part of. And also one more thing is, they would ask you what where you're learning throughout your work experience. How do you think that experience will play a key factor in your future life, especially when you pursue MBA and when you join somewhere else or do your own thing? So being prepared, whoever has work experience and is preparing for the interviews, please be thorough with what you did and how did it have an impact on your overall organization, growth of your organization. And also, what were your personal learnings, the challenges you faced, how were you able to gel with the team, and maybe some of your leadership positions, you can highlight them. Another thing which they asked me was about my hobbies. So I have learned classical music. So one of the interviewers in the panel happened to know nitty-gritties about it. So they asked me what all did I learn, how did it help me in my life, the instruments which I play, and some details about it. And yeah, so when you specify your hobbies in your application, or maybe they could ask you then and there what are your hobbies, and they will definitely ask you questions about them. So be prepared with the technicalities of your hobbies, I would say. Then other thing I was asked was when they gave me extempore in the beginning. So I had mentioned something there, one example. They asked me to explain it in detail later. So remember that your extempore can go ahead in your interview too. Then finally, I was told to talk about my role model, and it ended with some questions around my family background. So this was my overall interview. Over to you, Ishbani.
Yeah. So I remember my FMS interview was my last interview. So I had enough practice of sitting for an interview before that. But one thing that really scared me and which I was anticipating was extempore, like which topic I'll get and will I be able to speak at that moment or not. So my interview started with a brief introduction of mine, and then they asked me, and then they gave me extempore topic, which I already mentioned was peer pressure. Before that I was really nervous, but when extempore went, I was completely chill, and I was able to put across the points that I had in my mind. So after that I was in a composed state of mind, which really helped me in my interview. I was from a chemistry honors background, so then questions shifted towards my academics, and they asked me related questions related to electric vehicles, like which components are used in electric vehicles, which element is useful, where do we find lithium, why India is not able to manufacture lithium on its own, and can electric vehicles be a reality in next 5 years in a country like India. So these were questions related to my academics. They were not in-depth topics, but then they were topics related to the subject, which are currently very well known. So we can expect topics which are which are really practical, and we can connect with MBA and the B schools. And then all of a sudden the focus shifted to finance sector, which I was not well aware of. They asked me questions related to UPI, non-banking financial institutes. I remember that I started off giving what I know about it, and then I apologized, sorry sir, that's all I knew about them, and I am not aware of the technicalities. And the last question that came my way was from my SOP. I mentioned there that I worked with a startup, so they grilled me about my work, and they were just checking whether I really worked or not. So whatever we write in our SOP should be coherent with our life and the learnings we will carry forward. So if we are true to our SOPs, we'll anyways be able to answer those questions easily. So my interview experience was short and not totally sweet, but yeah, it can be called short and sweet.
Yeah.
I
So
just okay. Yeah, you can go ahead, Akhilesh.
yeah, so my interview was around 15 to 20 minutes long, around the average size of what generally the interviews go in FMS. In other B schools, they might be longer. My interview basically focused about the on the points that I had mentioned in my SOP and about my hobbies and things like that. So in terms of hobbies, be very thorough with very thorough with what you're mentioning in your hobbies, and sometimes try to make up questions on what the interviewer might ask you. For instance, my interviewer asked me, since I had mentioned reading and football, so my for reading they had asked me what my favorite book was, what did I like about that book, and how many books I read it in a year. And the very important question, I think, that was very pivotal to my interview was who was your favorite fictional character from a certain book. So the way so you have to basically prepare that answer beforehand, and what I did was I mentioned how I mentioned a character from a book that I'd read, and how she was how that character was very hardworking and went through a lot of hardships and ended up in a good place. So, and I tried to link those things with myself and what wanted to get out of an MBA education. So that was one thing that I found out. Another thing I would say is, again, as Anushika mentioned, you get asked about the other B school course that you have, and what is your preference order. And generally FMS you have 1 or 2 points that everyone says, right? But even in those 1 or 2 points, try to make it more personalized and link your story as to why those 2 points are very important to you. That was one thing. And in terms of domain specific questions, my interview wasn't as technical as Ishbani and Anushika's, as they mentioned. It mainly focused on HR questions. And again, my prior background played a key role. Like they were asking why MBA after engineering and things like that. So yeah, that was about it.
Yes, so I just missed out on adding one more point. So my interview also had some current affair questions. So be prepared with them. I was asked my personal view about that particular event. So I was asked what are your likes and dislikes about the union budget. So whenever you read a news, prepare your view about it and what do you like about it and what do you dislike about it. So that was the point I wanted to add.
Yeah, and I would also like to add on one point. I feel this is very similar to, appearing for an interview is very similar to appearing for CAT. Like we used to say, na, ki one section should not ruin your other section. Similarly, if you're not able to answer one question in the beginning, just leave it and go ahead. Do not let it ruin your chances because you can anyway answer the rest of the questions ahead. So I still remember my extempore was right at the beginning, and then I was asked a very simple question related to my work experience, which I didn't know anything about. So somehow I did feel bad for not answering it because it was a very simple question related to my work ex. But then again, do not feel bad about it and just focus on answering the rest of the questions in a proper way. That's it.
Well, someone has asked in the chats, is there any possibility of offline interviews? So as of now, we have no information regarding that, and we'll get to know no sooner than you guys will get to know. So you must remain in touch with the media cell, and you'll get to know the information from then only.
Also, someone has asked that they have 4 years of work experience, so should they apply or not? I feel we have we have a lot of diversity in terms of work experience in our batch. So your work experience should not really affect your selection that much here in FMS. So yeah, I guess just go ahead with it. Do we have to take any more questions? I can't see any in the chat. Great. So I guess, yeah, that was it for the session. Thank you so much, guys, for joining and all the very best. Anyway, if you have any doubts or if you want to ask anything, all of us are available on LinkedIn. So I guess all of us are there to help you out. Anything, if we missed it out in this interview, in this session, you can just reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'll surely try to help you out there. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Good luck to all the FMS aspirants from our side.
Yeah. See you soon in the offline setting. You people will be the lucky ones.